Hey there, and okay, I'm gonna put this video under my opinion videos, and I do apologize ahead of time if this feels somewhat rushed and not as polished as other things, but again, with my work schedule, I've been trying my best to sit down and talk about this, and it's been chaotic, especially since this week. Well, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to see all three Lord of the Rings films in RPX in Regal Cinemas. They actually played the extended editions. It was, of course, Fellowship, followed by Two Towers, followed by Return of the King, and my God, these three films, even 20 years later, are cinematic masterpieces. Which brings me into this video and talking about, well, I'm going to edit this and try to drop this tomorrow with the first two episodes coming out of Amazon's latest disaster entitled The Woke of Power, because it's not the Rings of Power. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the intro as always. And again, apologize if this isn't my best video. I'm just trying to get this out and stay relevant and everything, and just give some insight and my personal opinion about what's going on, what's the controversy, why is everyone seemingly hating on this new Amazon show. So if you give me a second to pour this drink and enjoy the intro and sit back for 10 or 15 minutes, however long this rant goes, and just let's talk about a disastrous billion-dollar show. God, I love this Jack and Cranberry. Okay, now what's going on? What's the controversy? Why so many people pissed off for? Well, in case you're new to YouTube or just my channel in general, there's this term that's called ratioing. Ratioing is basically, not that long ago, before even I had a channel, YouTube was taking the dislike feature and it was removing it. But technically speaking, you could still hit the dislike button, but it was hiding it from people. And people, as it is with the internet, they're finding ways around it. Apparently on Chrome, there's an extension that you can download and you can still see a video and the dislike feature. Supposedly it was created to help out smaller people with smaller channels like mine, and everyone knew that it was bullshit. Bullshit. We say bullshit because, well, simplicity. It was, you know, this Amazon, their first Lord of the Rings trailer came out and like, hey, look, 10, 20, 30 million views and stuff. And look, there's 10K or 15,000 people like upvoting this and liking it. What they're trying to hide is the fact that, okay, 10,000 people would like it, but then 100,000 people would dislike it. To say the least, the fans were pretty pissed off. But why? What's going on? Why are so many fans pissed off for? Well, I can say this, that Lord of the Rings for me and people in my neighborhood and, you know, my family and stuff, it wasn't part of like our mythology. You know, I guess some schools were teaching this stuff in Tolkien's work. We weren't one of them. And truth be told, when the movies came out, I mean, I was 20 years old and I kind of knew about them. I just wasn't, you know, too familiar with it. So when it came out, I wasn't sure what to expect. And to say the least, I was blown away.
I'm blown away.
Later on, because of the success of the three films, I went back and started reading the books, started understanding the lore, started understanding the history. And for all accounts, basically this show is bastardizing and changing everything that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. And for some people, when you spend your whole life reading these books and, you know, understanding the lore and they become a part of you, you do get pissed off when you guys start bastardizing his work. Now, there's different ways I can talk about this, so I'm trying to just, I guess, make it into different categories and different sections. There's a quote that's been out there by Peter Jackson. It's used plenty. I'm going to find it and download it and show it to you myself. When Peter Jackson made these three films, he admitted that himself, that, listen, you know, I have my own personal beliefs, I have my own personal politics.
As filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies.
As a director, it's not my job to insert my own personal beliefs into this work.
Just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film.
What is my job is to adapt Tolkien's work. Now, obviously things have to be changed. You know, characters like Tom Bombadil probably wouldn't work on screen. Some things may be taken like in terms of like time. You know, I guess like the entire, you know, trilogy is like 18 years versus the films is 18 months. You're not going to show these characters over this big course of time and stuff. So, you know, changes always have to be made in certain adaptations, but changes that make sense. The point Peter Jackson was trying to say is that
I was kind of hoping you stick to the source material.
I'm just adapting a story. Simple as that. Versus now, the biggest problem is, it seems like Amazon and people involved, they're not worried about adapting a story. They're worried about putting their own personal politics into the story. And that's where you're going wrong. And that's where you're pissing a lot of people off. Especially when you use terms like we have to modernize Lord of the Rings. The thing is, no you don't.
What a medieval muddle. We'll have to modernize it.
Now the thing is, Tolkien first started writing these books, well, as early as 1914.
Long ago.
And published the Hobbit book in 1937, and then Lord of the Rings about 20 years later, and let me check this real quick, in 1954. So To say the least, it was a different time and a different era. But even 1914, we're going on, well, over 100 years that these stories were told, and they were, adapted into writing. But the problem is, people want to constitute this modernization of this work, and you shouldn't be doing this because these works should be timeless. Whether it's 50 years later, 100 years later, in fact, when all of us are dead and buried, and it's 100 years from now, these stories should be timeless because the themes, what he was talking about, should age. It shouldn't reflect modern day politics, and that's a friggin' problem. Okay, so Tolkien himself was a World War I veteran, and I didn't know this, walking into the films, that certain things were allegories. Like, if you watch The Two Towers, the part where Sam and Frodo and then Smeagol, they're walking across the dead marshes, and, Frodo and Sam, they're seeing these dead bodies inside the water. That was him doing allegory for World War I. This guy was a veteran. He was the definition of a badass. He was writing these books and these stories while he's in the trenches of World War I, and just, that's hardship. And that's also, people would say nowadays, a person like that, he's very good at adapting hardships and war and just personal drama because
he experienced everything.
So overall, the point I'm trying to make is that when Tolkien was writing this work, he was doing it from a place of just, adversity, and he was trying to reflect the world around him. And even spots like the Shire and the Hobbits, that was reflecting the townsfolk and the people where he came from. That's it.
I missed home.
The biggest problem for some people, not a lot of people, and this term goes a lot around with the internet, I'll call these people the very vocal minority because, well, let's face it, if you watch all three films and then even the prequels, the Hobbit films, the cast looks a certain way. And, there's certain skin color, you know what it is.
Fucking white people.
Peter Jackson, 20 years ago, easily could have casted any kind of actors for these roles, but he was doing his best to adapt Tolkien's lore. Now, you could spend all day talking about, well, other fantasy genres have like black dwarves or something, or black elves, and that's okay. No one's against that. My thing is, if you want to create a fantasy genre and say, okay, in my genre, in my books, all the elves are born from this like a desert climate, and they all have very dark skin, like maybe desert people or like Middle Eastern people. That's awesome. If in your books you say, well, okay, you know what, the dwarves and stuff in my fantasy, they come from a demographic that looks very much like Africa, where the sun's out all the time and they're all dark skinned. Awesome. I would have no problem reading that. I would have no problem supporting that. But if you want to look at Tolkien's lore,
He was very specific, okay?
you can create any world that you want to create. If you told me that, hey, listen, in my world, all the elves look Asian, okay, I'll support that. And this is something that I'll make a later video at one point, that people like me get sick and tired of this constant modernism of, I have to see myself on screen. No, you don't. Best believe when I say like Squid Game, okay? I watched Squid Game. I love Squid Game. Guess what? Nobody looked like me, and the show was fantastic. I grew up watching shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or like, Family Matters, and just, I played games like Mafia 3, Horizon Zero Dawn with Aloy, and said I can be here all day with that. But the point is, I have no problem enjoying something without every single character on screen looking just like me. And that's the thing with Tolkien. When Tolkien talking to people on the internet, whether it's like Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Reddit, and even friends of mine who've read Tolkien's work, nobody ever got the impression that Tolkien was a racist. Nobody ever got the impression that he was making these characters out of anger or hate or bigotry or anything like that. The elves themselves, if you do some research, he created these characters to be very, very fair-skinned, very pale, and even based on different mythologies such as Celtic or Norse. And if you guys understand the demographic of Norse and Norwegian people, they are white. It's simple as that.
It's very simple.
Now, same thing as dwarves. If you go back and watch the first film, Elrond is even talking to Gandalf about having the dwarves help out.
The dwarves? They hide in their mountains seeking riches. They care nothing for the troubles of others.
In Tolkien's mythology and most mythologies, dwarves are greedy. Dwarves are stingy. Dwarves spend most of their time underground, digging massive caves, constantly looking for jewels, constantly getting gems. In fact, that was the entire point of the Hobbit trilogy, was these guys do these massive wars over one freaking diamond.
The heart of the mountain. The Arkenstone.
But the point is, they spend 99.9% of their day underground, and
There's no sun.
so it makes sense the fact that most of the dwarves would be like, a Celtic people or something, or have very fair skin. The point is, there's nothing racial about this, and for now people to say that I have to see myself on screen,
Came from seeing the first trilogy, but there were no elves that looked like me.
I'm sorry, but that's bullshit.
Bullshit.
Now it comes down to established characters. We have a character of Galadriel, and Galadriel was played by Cate Blanchett, and very excellent done. And also, hate to keep bringing this up, but like, Look at Kate Blanchett, look at Liv Tyler. Whenever you see these characters, Kate Blanchett or Liv, they're not really that pale. They kind of paled them up a little bit with makeup, and whenever you see them on screen, they were glowing, almost like they were fair skin. Anyway, the point is Galadriel was a badass. She was intimidating. In fact, when you watch The Fellowship, when she's talking to Frodo, and Frodo hands her the ring and he offers it to her, what happens? The whole atmosphere changes and her voice, and it's dark. And I mean, when I was 20 years old, it was pretty intimidating. And the point was Galadriel was very powerful, she was very ethereal, and she was very strong in her own right. It wasn't about how good she could swing a sword. It wasn't about her being like this major warrior. And now with this whole Rings of Power show, they make her out to be this like knockoff Xena warrior princess, and people are like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Because Tolkien didn't write her out to be this way. He never wrote anything in the appendices even about her wielding a sword or being a combat warrior. So that's another reason people are pissed off for. Because, like, why do you have Galadriel all of a sudden acting like, well, a dude?
A dude.
Okay, and last but not least, in terms of lore breaking, you can look up anytime you want on the internet this term called Harfoots. And according to the Rings of Power, these Harfoots were supposed to be the precursor to the Hobbits, which again is bullshit.
Bullshit.
Now, it does say in the descriptions that Harfoots were browner of skin, that they didn't have beards, that, of course, like most Hobbits, they most of the time didn't wear footwear. But the thing is, they didn't exist until the Third Age. And now the Rings of Power is supposed to take place in the Second Age. So to say the least, people are like, okay, why are you inserting characters and even a species of characters into an age where they don't belong? This is why people are upset for it, because you're constantly friggin' breaking lore.
As far as I can tell, there is no lore.
And even to the point where it feels like modernism, because you have to put modern characters and even modern diversity characters into a show and into a place in this lore's history where they don't belong.
They do not belong here.
It's very simple to like, why are you doing this for besides you're trying to add your personal politics into this show?
No politics. None.
I wasn't big into the Lord of the Rings, but I got big into the Wheel of Time. And the Wheel of Time, I took it personal when I did watch that god-awful show. And trust me, as somebody who's read the books twice and even listened to them a third time on Audible books there, man, every single episode was just a massive disrespect and a massive disgrace to the legacy that Robert Jordan laid out. So I took that pretty hard because that show is total dog shit.
That is one big pile of shit.
So I can understand why people are upset with the Lord of the Rings for it, because it's like they're just taking Tolkien's work and they're not adapting his work. There is so much lore out there and so much mythology and so much stuff you guys could be using, and you're not. You're not trying to adapt his work. You're trying to modernize his work, and you shouldn't be modernizing somebody's work. You know, that's the point. Is these books are still being read when I'm recording this in 2022. They will probably be read outside my lifetime. They'll probably be read outside of your lifetime, because certain themes are ageless. Certain themes are classic. I mean, the entire trilogy, again, just watch it this week. Stuff like, betrayal, about war, about even racism. Because when you look at the characters of Gimli and Legolas, well, elves and dwarves weren't the best of friends. And by the end, they became two friends who cherished each other. It comes down to sacrifice. I mean, even the character of Arwen, she wants to sacrifice her immortality for her love of Aragorn. And just, there's so many themes that should be universal. I'll say one last example before I wrap this up is that, this is why I get upset for. When I went to go see Black Panther and, the Black Panther movement and stuff, and this was such a win-win for certain people of certain demographics, and bullshit.
Bullshit.
For me, my personal favorite scene in that film had nothing to do with skin color. It had nothing to do with wealth. It had nothing to do with, sexual orientation. It came down to when T'Challa was talking to his father in the afterlife. Trust me when I say, as a man who lost his dad, what I wouldn't give to see my father one last time. What I wouldn't give to say goodbye to my dad. What I wouldn't give to tell my father one last time, Dad, I love you. It's going to be okay. The feeling I get even myself of, trying to live up to my father's reputation, to try to be a good man like he was. And in them moments, just seeing T'Challa talk to his father, that meant more to me than the entirety of the rest of the film. And that translates down to not being about white or black or any kind of skin tone. I wouldn't care if T'Challa at that point was Middle Eastern, or if he was Asian, or if he was Hispanic. I didn't care. All it came down to was a little boy saying goodbye to his father one last time. Themes like that are supposed to be important, and that should take over this whole modernism and stuff and these political messages. People don't care. So it comes down to people like me, and I'd say most people out there, fans of fantasy, fans of Hollywood, fans of storytelling, when you have to sit there and constantly consume something that's entertainment and see yourself in it.
You are stupid. You are straight up stupid.
And that's my point, is that these themes should be timeless. There's no political messaging. I mean, it's like you can take Tolkien's work if you want to and just pick it apart and talk about, yes, there was inspirations from his time of World War I, obviously with the Dead Marshes and seeing stuff in No Man's Land and the pools and the dead bodies and, different Celtic and Norse mythologies. But the only real message you could take from this is just war is bad, war is hell, war is turmoil and drama and what it does to people, and just little subtle messages, as I said, with racism, because between elves hating dwarves and stuff, and even humans hating orcs, but it's just a simple tale of good versus evil about the little guy, the hobbits, the most insignificant, smallest creatures in the land, them making a difference. So that's it. That's all I can talk about. And, again, some people will make these endless channels. I'm not one of them. I'm not here for that. I'm not just going to automatically shit on the Rings of Power because that's a trendy thing to do. I'll be fair as always, as anybody new to this and watching me later on. If I think it's shit, I'll say it's shit. If I think it's not that bad, I'll say, you know what, it's not that friggin' bad. But
okay, you're right. I'm a little biased myself.
I do have a certain bias going into it, watching other people on YouTube, and I can understand why certain people on YouTube, why they are mad for it, why they're pissed off, because to some people, these books are like the fucking Bible. Some people have read these books so many times, and I can get that. And this doesn't come from just Lord of the Rings. For me, it's the Wheel of Time. For other people, it's Star Wars. For some people, it's comic books, things you grew up with as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, and even in a grown man or a grown woman. If people start bastardizing your stuff, the stuff that you love and stuff that, meant so much to you, you do get pissed off about that.
Very pissed off.
As always, checking my fucking watch.
I am very busy.
Yeah, if you're sitting there, if you're adapting a dead man's work and trying to insert any kind of message, well, you've already fucked up, and all I can tell you is
go fuck yourself.
So, as always, guys, I'm gonna finish this, pull up my buddy Bender, and you know how it is, checking my time, but okay, get ready, here it comes.
This calls for a drink.
I'm heading back to work.